His voice cut the clink of silverware. "Did you get the email about your trust fund?" I froze mid-bite, the fork halfway to my mouth, the roast toothsome and suddenly meaningless. The room smelled like lemon polenta, and something burned on the stove 2 rooms over. Grandpa's eyes were on me, flat, unreadable, and for a second I thought he was joking. Nobody ever told me I had a trust fund. If you want more stories like this, hit subscribe, but listen first. I grew up with other people's versions of scarcity. Our house knew bargains and second-hand registers. My allowance was a lecture on priorities. My mother, charismatic, persuasive, practiced in charm, knew how to dress debt in silk. She drove a nicer car than our driveway deserved, hosted elaborate birthdays for her friends, and said, with a shrug and a smile that never reached her eyes, "Life isn't fair." That line lodged in me like a warning. Accept the unfairness, make do, don't ask questions. It wasn't that she kept us hungry. It was that she taught me gratefulness for crumbs while she ate the cake. I learned to smooth the edges, pay the utilities, fix a pipe, juggle part-time jobs in college so I could stay afloat. I figured that's what adults did when the world didn't cooperate. I never imagined the world was cooperating with somebody else at my expense. 3 months before that dinner, a thin envelope arrived on my birthday with handwriting I recognized. Inside, a single card with a printed photo of a lake. Cheap, but honest. The line that stopped me wasn't bold or dramatic. It said, casually, "Don't forget about the fund. Your grandpa asked me to remind you." I laughed it off at first. A family joke, I thought. Then I tried to follow up. I emailed the bank listed on the card. I called the customer service numbers I found online. I waited for responses that never came. Notifications I expected were missing from my inbox. Important messages, password resets, authorization confirmations were gone. The bank's contact forms returned only automated replies, or they were redirected to some archived thread that made no sense. I started to notice small things that didn't add up. Browser autofill suggested an email address I didn't recognize whenever I typed in the bank's contact field. My mother's signature on a supposed authorization form looked like her handwriting, only cleaner, more practiced, as if someone had traced the letters until they learned the rhythm. Once I began looking, the evidence piled up in a quiet, ugly way. Mismatched timestamps, a forwarded confirmation to an unfamiliar account, a ledger entry that moved money out on a date I was at work and she was at a boutique opening. I didn't seek drama. I compiled facts, screenshots, bank statements blurred into lines of numbers that suddenly read like testimony. I saved every piece of correspondence, stacked it like a case file. I took copies to a lawyer, a kind, plain-spoken woman who didn't look surprised. "You don't have to prove everything to everyone," she said. "You need the right people in the right room." That sentence never left me. We planned a dinner that looked ordinary. My grandfather liked routine. The same table, the same linen, the same carved wooden salt shaker that had been in the family for decades. He loves to watch the seasons change from the kitchen window. He doesn't like surprises. That was why he was perfect bait. On the day, I brought the laptop, and my throat was tight, the screen a small rectangle of potential. The lawyer sat quietly on my left. A detective stayed in the corner with a notepad as unobtrusive as a shadow. My mother arrived, polished and pleasant, the same smile she used for neighbors and clerks. She took her seat across from me and started telling a story about a charity gala she'd attended last month, her voice a practiced lilt. Grandpa cleared his throat. The silverware rang when he set down his fork. "Did you get the email about your trust fund?" he asked. Slower this time, eyes never leaving her face. The knife slid against my plate. I felt the air in the room shift like a pulled curtain. I had rehearsed my breathing, but not this exact secondary emotion. Relief and dread braided together. I opened my laptop. The plan was simple. Show, don't argue. Let the evidence speak in the blunt language of dates and headers. I scrolled to the bank's security history, the page that logs contact changes, and clicked.
The browser autofill revealed the email it was sending confirmations to. We'd seen that strange address before. The security tab showed a change, time-stamped and signed off by an authorization name that matched my mother's full name. She laughed at first. "What is this?" she said, a tone used to deflect. "Someone could have... Identity theft, you know. I've been so careful." The lawyer slid a folder across the table. Inside were copies of forms, an authorization bearing her name, signatures that a handwriting expert later described in plain words, forged. There were bank statements with transfers labeled in ways I had only seen before in nightmares. The detective didn't need to speak. He folded his hands, stood, and said, "Ma'am, we need you to come with us." The room went quiet enough that I could hear my heart. My mother stood as if awoken, her expression a combination of surprise and a calculation. She protested, one or two sentences like flint thrown against glass. Then she was letting the detective lead her toward the door like a thing being removed rather than a person. They read the rights, they let her out. I remember the click of the front door closing more than I remember any shouts. It wasn't cinematic. There was no dramatic gasp track, no villainous monologue. There was only the small, steady sound of silverware settling back into the bowl. My grandfather folded his napkin, looked at me, and for the first time in a long while, his voice softened. "She's taken a lot," he said. "But you're a better hand with money than I ever was." The aftermath was clinical. Lawyers filed papers. The bank froze accounts pending an investigation. There were meetings that felt like a strange, necessary surgery, intimate and unromantic. I sat in a chair that wasn't mine and watched adults I trusted do their jobs. The charges were brought, the formal language of theft and forgery filled document headers. I didn't crave spectacle after that. I wanted order. Control changed hands quietly. My grandfather signed documents that gave me oversight of what had always been described to me as an abstract promise, a fund held in his name for my future. He put the legal control where he thought it would be safest, with the person he'd seen trying to make her own way, who had patched leaks and paid bills and taught herself how to read ledgers like maps. He told me, without flourish, "Write the rules." That line, "Write the rules," has become my compass. For years I lived under the phrase, "Life isn't fair." Now I keep a different sentence in my pocket. I will choose the terms of my life. Reclaiming what was mine wasn't about revenge. It was about refusing passivity. It was about insisting that hidden things be named and that accounts be balanced. Not so I could gloat, but so I could plan and move forward without the shadow of someone else's taking. People ask if I felt triumphant. Not exactly. There was relief and a cold, steady satisfaction that the truth had a sound. The quiet click of a laptop, the rustle of paper, the footsteps of someone led away. There was also grief, loss of the mother I wished I'd had, the family I imagined, small pieces of a past I could no longer trust. Tonight, when I remember that dinner, I go back to the small details, the scrape of a fork, the way my grandfather's voice carried over the table, the soft glow of the laptop screen made ordinary by the fact that it had become the place where a private ledger opened and a private history was read aloud. Ordinary things turned to reckoning. If this resonated, tell someone, leave your story in the comments, and subscribe for more true personal reckonings.